Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming tonight. The purpose of tonight is to talk about Tai Chi, give you a little bit of background about it, as well as discuss the intro to Tai Chi, what to expect in order to get the most out of the practice, as far as learning some of the basics and fundamentals. I'll just start with what Tai Chi is, and then we'll take it from there. We'll also do a little standing meditation that's part of the intro to Tai Chi, and that will give you a head start. Okay, so it will kind of be your homework if you're already signed up for the intro. Okay. So first, Tai Chi is a martial art. Okay. The emphasis on the art is to focus internally on the bones and the internal structure of the body, and use that structure to be as efficient as possible to redirect force. Okay? It's amazing in that sense because it offers a lot of other qualities such as meditation, because you have to focus in order to bring your senses inward. And by doing that, you're focusing on what the body is doing in the present moment. So it drops you right into the present, especially when you know what to focus on. Okay. And within that, there's another discipline that's called Qigong. And Qigong means, Qi means energy. It means life force, that motivational force that drives everything, that we can't really describe or we can feel, right? And Gong means skill. So Qigong is developing your skill and harnessing that energy. And Tai Chi is a martial art that emphasizes how to harness that energy through your structure, through your alignment. So there's a lot going on there besides just doing your form. And the benefits that you gain aren't really from the movements themselves. They're from what you're applying as you're doing the movements. And so when you have that understanding, then you can gain a lot out of your Tai Chi practice. The fundamental focus in Tai Chi is balance. The emphasis is how to apply a type of balance that keeps your structure, keeps you integrated. And balance is essentially being able to create a counter force. Okay, so when most people move their body, they move one body part. In Tai Chi, we want to learn how to use the whole body to affect one body part. And the reason behind that is that, again, we're using a counter force. So if you think of a scale, if you want to raise one side of the scale, you can go over to that side and you can lift it up, but that's not the purpose of that scale. The actual purpose is to measure, right? So instead of doing that, you can add more weight on the other side, and that causes the other side to lift. And that's balanced movement. So in Tai Chi, we're always trying to look for that. Whenever something is moving up, something else must be going down. Whenever you're moving forward, something else must be going back. And this essentially is what we call yin and yang. And I don't know if you're aware of the yin-yang symbol. That's okay. Some head nods, so that's good. That's the Tai Chi symbol. The teardrops that are spiraling, that are rotating, one black and one white, representing opposing forces that are working together. Okay. So that's the emphasis in Tai Chi, how to make those forces work together. So essentially that's what Tai Chi is. That's what we're looking to develop, that ability to find that balance. And so we have different methods to do that. Okay. So I'm going to introduce you to one method tonight to help you tune into the body, get familiar with your structure, and then get a sense of creating this counterbalance. Okay? I don't expect you to master it tonight. I need to introduce it to you so that you can start practicing it, and then you'll start to, as you practice it, you'll start to notice things. Things will be revealed to you through bringing your awareness to this practice. Okay? So we'll do this exercise, and I'm just going to ask you all to stand. This is a standing meditation. And I usually start my classes with this meditation. So you want your feet to be about shoulder width apart. And you're going to place one hand on top of the other in front of the low abdomen. As you do that, lightly touch the thumbs together. And what I'd like you to do is focus on the breath and tune in to your inhale and your exhale. When you exhale, exhale out the mouth for right now. And make the exhale longer than the inhale. Hopefully what you notice is when you do that exhale, your body relaxes a little bit. So intend for there to be more relaxation when you exhale. Allow the shoulders to rest over the body. And continue to relax, starting from the top of your head, creating this wave down through the body, all the way into your feet. And one more breath. Now I'd like you to focus on your feet. Notice how they're resting into the floor. And what you're looking for is the pressure in your feet. Do you have more pressure on your heels, on the ball of the foot? Try to make it even. Do you have more weight on one side than the other? On the left foot compared to the right foot? Make it even. And as you find that evenness, continue to relax into it. Now begin to focus on each joint, starting from the ankles and working through the body all the way to the base of your skull. And go through the same process. Feel for evenness in the joints. If there is not even pressure, then adjust. As you find that even pressure, you'll start to notice that you have more support, and because of that support, you can relax your muscles more. Good, now relax your arms, shake your legs out. That's the basic procedure. Okay, that's the description, but what we really want to do is create a wave that runs down through the body, through the muscle system, and up through the bone structure. Okay? So you go a little faster than I was describing, so there's this subtle movement that's happening. You don't want to get stuck in one position. There's actually movement through your bones.
And when you're going up,
Yes.
do you go up like a CAT scan and go up your hands, or do you go up the torso?
It's just the center of the body.
Okay.
Yeah. And the arms are really a part of the relaxing part that's going downward.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so once again, placing your hands underneath the, right at the low abdomen, underneath the navel. Let the head feel as though it's suspended from above, and then everything else is relaxing down away from the head. And this will stretch through the spine. Feel your weight sinking into your feet. And then create the wave up through the joints. And when you're right at the base of the skull, move back to the top of your head. Remind yourself that the head is suspended. And once again, create that wave down through the muscles. Down into your feet. You can tell some of you are feeling that. I'm getting some nods. That's good. Others, you just keep practicing and get better at it, I promise. Okay, now with this idea of settling, relaxing the muscles, lining up to the bones, shift your weight over to one leg. Try to keep the pelvis level. When you do that, the opposite heel will lift up a little bit. Okay? And then from that position, relax down onto that supporting foot. So now you're on one leg. And stack through that one leg. That should create a reaction where the opposite foot gets a little lighter. And then sink back to the middle. Create that wave again down, and then stack through the bones evenly. And drop over to the other side. Melt. Hips level. Stack through the bones. And relax into the middle. Once again, stack through the bones. Okay, so you're creating this wave that goes through you. Very nice. Now, I'll give you some additional work, okay, that you can experiment with. I'd like you to imagine, until it becomes real, that the shoulders have weights attached to them. And so the shoulders begin to press down into the body. And if you do that just right, the arms will get lighter. That pressure on the shoulders needs to go all the way down into your feet. I don't expect most of you to be able to do that, okay? But this is something to experiment with and play with. Eventually, at some point, you'll get it, and you'll have an epiphany. Your mind will be blown.
But if you've got weights on there, isn't that not relaxing? I mean, for me, it feels like I'm tightening it up by feeling the weight on it.
It's true. It actually creates more of a stretch from here to here. Okay? It's not as relaxed as when you're just doing this. This is the next level. The next level is you create pressure in the body, Remember, we talked about the scale, and you have to create weight in certain parts of the body to cause something else to happen. So you'll feel pressure. This part is more strengthening. But you use this to fall back into. So you don't start to strain, you relax back into this. And then pressing the shoulders down creates that lightness. It's a weird feeling because you might first, as you press the shoulders, your whole arm might go down like this. And so it's not isolated enough. The pressure has to be just on the shoulders. Or you might go down and your head will go like this. But then you lose the rule of the head being suspended. So the head has to be up. So eventually, when all those things integrate properly, you'll start to feel that quality of lightness. Okay. So that's an additional part. You play with that at home. Do a little bit of this relaxation and lining up through your bones, and then drop weight on the shoulders. Let that compress through your bone structure down into your feet. Because we use that a lot. So there's a movement where you lift your hands. The idea is to get that power to move from the shoulders down into your feet, causing the lift here. Okay. It's very different than raising from here. When you do this, all local.
Instead of your arms lifting, your body's pulling your arms.
Yes, exactly. It's like a pulley system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And you'll feel a lot of pressure in the body. Okay.
Core.
Yeah, the core. Okay. So that's what we practice, and that's applied in all the movements. Okay. So with that understanding, now I'll demonstrate the form to you. So you can have a seat. So the form that we're practicing in the intro is called the Yang Style 8. It's Yang Style 8. The 8 means there's 8 forms. Okay. Actually, there's 10. But they want to really make it simplified so people can feel like, oh, I can do 8. But there's a beginning and then there's a closing. Those count, so they would be 10. But the reason why I've chosen to do this form is you could go online and there's a lot of references to this form. So you can take a look and see what the form is about. Okay. I'll just begin and show you what the form is. There's different ranges, meaning levels that the stance can move into. Right now I'm just doing the high stance. So that's the form that we work on in the intro to Tai Chi. The things that you want to consider as we're working through this is don't be alarmed with all the movements. I'm going to break it down for you. You know, it's not like we're going to start just doing those movements. Okay? There's a lot of preparation work. So part of that is the stances. So for example, in this movement there's a twist step. So I'm not going to show that to you right away in the intro. We're just going to move into a stance. And the standard is a bow stance. That's used quite a bit. Okay? So the bow stance from here, an easy way to get into one is just to shift the weight, turn, and then step out at a 45. And that pretty much sets you into a standard bow stance. So from there, I can give you one posture, and instead of doing all the fancy stuff at the beginning, I can just have you go into the stance and place one hand to the side and one hand out. So you can get familiar with that posture and then try to feel for your alignments. Okay? Because again, we're working from the inside and then working out. Okay? So we want to make sure that that's there. Was that a question?
No.
You're working your
That
shoulder?
was that was the thread pulling my head straight
Ah.
up. Keeping my head up.
Good.
I think that's where I would probably, because I'll be looking down and doing all this. And I get
That's right. Yeah, you always want to have your eyes looking forward.
Yeah, and I notice when you turn too, your pelvis and shoulders stay pretty much the same. But
Right.
if you turn from here, not from here.
It's a very good observation. In Tai Chi, we always want to keep these points lined up.
Okay.
So we never twist.
Right.
Okay? We actually turn from here, so you actually open up in the ball and socket joints in the hip. It keeps you stable. And there's also no tilting. So you can't tilt from here to here, or here and here. Because that disrupts how that energy shifts and changes. When you keep the pelvis level and you shift your weight over to one side, that side becomes the heavy side. The other side becomes lighter. This is where you apply that ability to sink and drop down onto that foot. That creates the lift. Okay. So what we tend to do in practice is if we're going to lift, we go like this. Okay. So we really want to take our time with the standing here and get used to that feeling. That's why that's a home practice. So you can just do that for 10 minutes every day, and that will accumulate. You know, you'll get more and more benefit out of it. Maybe you'll want to do it longer, you know, but I leave that up to you. Okay? So that's the form that we work on. Again, we will work with the postures, and then we'll break it down into what you're doing with the arms. There's basically two movements that you do with the arms. Okay? So as a reference, having my hands here, the first movement is an outward circle. That means that my hand is going to move out, away, come around, and down, and swipe across. That's a full outward circle. Some of the movements have half of that circle. Okay? So for example, this is 2 outward circles. And as I turn, this turns into a push, and this turns into a pull. But if you have that fundamental understanding of what that circle is, that will help you. Okay? The other one is an inward circle. And you just use your fingertips, the direction they're going, that's where the hand goes. It comes around this way, palm faces you, and then moves that way. So we'll cover that more in the intro. Okay, so then you just combine those pieces. So you could do that without doing this fancy twist step, where you step out here and go this way. You can just go from here. I can do movement from here and step out this way. Okay? So that's how you want your mind to focus on the form. You want to break it down into small pieces and then you put those pieces together, it becomes easier to learn. Because then you can distinguish what's happening. You can say, oh, there's an inward circle, there's an outward circle. Now I can understand that. Okay? And so we'll work through 6 weeks on that. Yes, Alice?
I have a question, and I'm just the candy person. What do you do with your breath while you're doing it?
Ideally, would you just focus on breathing naturally?
Oh,
Yeah. Just let your breath flow. When you're doing the standing practice and you're wanting to work on relaxing, you'll start to notice that when you exhale out the mouth, you feel like you can relax and settle into the body more. So that will start to become more instinctual, and when you're doing your movements, you'll have a feeling that I want to settle here, and you'll have an exhale in the breath. Okay. So eventually all of those things come together, but if you try to do all of them at one time, it becomes very difficult because the coordination is too high. And whenever you try to coordinate too many things, your body gets tight. Right? So you take it, you break it down into pieces. Good question. All right. Any other questions?
What happens if you're naturally uncoordinated?
You just do this.
My whole class.
Yeah, you do this and until you can really take your time in feeling that sinking. Because to be honest, all of that sinking translates into the movements. Your body starts to tell you what the next move is. If you sink over to one side and the opposite foot gets light, you know, oh, I'm going to probably need to step. So your body starts to teach you, you work with it, one moment by one moment by one moment, feeling each change that's taking place in the body. Okay. Any other questions?
What about your pace? You had a very slow, even pace. Is there a pace? Is there something you're trying to...
Yeah, the pace is based off your connection, right? So if I haven't dropped my weight onto this foot, this won't lift. So there's no reason to step. There has to be that feeling of lightness. Then I know it's time to move. And every move is like that. The hands lifting, there has to be that sinking that's creating that. Okay? So you have to feel for that connection throughout. And that creates your pace. There's different styles of Tai Chi. So some styles you go very fast. It's more in the martial side. But you still have to have those connections. And in others you go slower.
Okay.
So there's a range. It's unlimited as far as what range you want to go. But it always starts with that slow pace. So you can gain that connection. And gaining that connection in Tai Chi is called listening. It's not listening to me. It's sensing what's taking place in the body and noticing how the energy is moving through your body. Energy meaning that pressure. Is it lining up? Can you feel that connection? Any other questions?
So when you're standing and doing that sinking, I think I noticed that your knees bent a little bit, and I think I was finding my knees more straight, and
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, my knees were kind of
Yeah.
moving around.
Right.
So how should it be? Should they be kept straight, or when you're sinking, should they literally bend some?
That's a very good question. As far as Tai Chi structure is concerned, there's always some bend in your knees. But when you're sinking, you don't bend the knee anymore. Because when you bend, at that point, that energy is dissipating out the knee, so it doesn't reach the floor. So there has to be a certain point where the knee It's bent, but you lock it in that position and you allow the push to move through into the floor. Okay. So that's the difference between physical structure and energy, right? We want to make sure and we feel how that energy is moving through the body.
So is it energy making my knees go like this?
Yeah, yes, it means your legs are getting tired, right? You haven't found that line that runs right through your bones. Once you find that line, there's less of that.
I think when I took a class, I've taken 2 classes from him, and I think one of the things that he said that in the first class for me that kind of clued in for me was think about stacking your bones.
Yes.
And I think that it was kind of like, oh, you can take the weight off your muscles and just have the bones stacking. And I thought that for me, that really, from a visual and from an internalizing it, I was like, oh yeah, I get that. Okay, so it's not, not bent enough to buckle, but
Exactly.
bent enough to support the structure.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Again, that's why the standing is so important. So I'll always go back to that and say, stand more. Until that standing is a natural part of all your movements. And you'll feel it. There's an effortlessness. There's effort here because you're sinking, but all of a sudden the other side is effortless. Any other questions?
Can you describe a typical class? Do we come in and start with basics and then move into movements? Or can you sit down if you get tired? Or
Yeah, all of that, okay. Basically, a typical class for the intro,
right?
okay, is usually we practice with the shoes off. If you have any foot problems, then you're welcome to wear your orthotics, whatever you need. Okay, we just want to make sure that the soles of the shoes clean for the floors. But aside from that, we usually practice barefoot. You can wear your socks if you like for additional padding, or to keep your feet warm. But I want to make sure that you understand that you have to really practice the sinking when you have socks on, because you don't want to slip, right? And you practice with your stance at a natural height. So don't try to go deep into the stances. Okay. Just stay natural, keep your structure integrated. That will help you find those lines. Okay, when you get better, then you can start to sink and drop more into the stance, making it wider. In the intro, we're going to go through all the different postures. That means I'm going to have you go like this, go over, do this. And I'll do them with you, okay? It's just to make you familiar with those moves and with that form. And then we're going to take the first one on the first day and start to implement the circles. The turn of the waist and how that takes you and brings you into here. Okay. And we'll work on that. We'll probably do 2 moves in that way. And then we're going to repeat them over and over so you remember them. Okay, because I want you to go home the night of. Go home and do those moves. At least one time. Okay? Then, every day, until the next class, practice those 2 moves at least one time. Okay? So that way you're ready, we can move on to the next move the next week. Okay? And I seriously need your participation in that, because that's the only way to move forward. It does require that you have to memorize those movements. Okay? And I promise it will be in your best interest, because when you learn those moves, then you can start moving more inward. You don't have to rely on me so much. So that will make it much easier for you to learn. And so by the end, we'll have a series of movements. And I'm not going to introduce you to the twist step. It's just going to be the arm movements and going into that bow stance. Okay. We might do the shuffle step when we get to cloud hands. But that's it essentially. Okay. So the focus is on memorizing. Okay. That way, if you decide to take the class on Wednesday nights, you can just jump right in and do those movements. And you feel very familiar with them, and we can go through the whole form. It will also help you become familiar with some of the key movements in Tai Chi. So if you want to take the other classes that we offer a 24 form. All of the movements that you'll learn in the intro are in the 24. And then there's additional movements that but you'll have a good foundation to start with. And as you feel how the energy moves through the body, it'll become very interesting. So that's why I want you to have that sense, work on that first. It's the most advanced, but it's basic in the sense that you have to practice it until you achieve it. Then when you have that feeling, now you're at an advanced level, or intermediate level, and then you refine that feeling. And it's endless as far as how you can connect the mind and body, connect with heaven and earth, making sure that your alignment is just right. Your body will feel at ease. Yeah.
You mentioned something, I was going to say this really, but so watching you do what you did in your 8 forms,
Yes.
you didn't use much floor space.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking that is that we did Tai Chi in another school
Mm-hmm.
a while ago, and one of the reasons we never really followed up on it was because we have a relatively small room.
So do I.
And we moved all the furniture we could, and we still couldn't practice
Right.
because we were taking up so much geography that we just couldn't do it.
Yes.
That we could do.
Yeah. Right.
How does the floor space compare when you're talking about the 24 forms? Are you adding more
Yeah.
space
It's
in?
more dimension because the 24 form goes linearly back and forth.
Okay.
So it does require a bit more room. However, you can modify it. You can modify the 24 form where it only takes up about that much space.
Okay.
So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I can show you some ways to modify the form.
We need to get through the 8 first.
But get to the 8, yeah. That'll give you a really good foundation.
So the introduction is the 8 forms, and then the
Absolutely.
Wednesday night class
It's still the 8 form.
continues to do the 8 forms
Yep.
on a regular, ongoing basis.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Because there's plenty in that. And what I'd like to do is get to a point where I can add a few more moves to the 8 form. There's some nice moves that give you a really good stretch that I'd like to add into it. But I want you to have a foundation first. And so when I practice on my own, I do a lot of different movements. And part of my focus is to open up my body. So I do the stances deeper, but I have to make sure that that structure is still there. And it's a lot more challenging. It almost makes you not want to do Tai Chi. Unless you really like a workout, right? Because then it's like going on a hike where you're at a slope. So the deeper your stance is, the more challenging it is.
Can you show us that?
Sure.
I knew that would come.
Yeah. So I'll do kind of what I practice at home, a little bit of what I practice at home. This feels good already. Doing 3 of those?
Yeah, a lot of lunges.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Thanks for asking me to do that. So it's the combination of that internal structure with being able to open the joints and the ligaments a bit more. Okay. Some people can crouch down so low that they bring their knee to the floor and their body down to the floor. It's one of Michael's. Okay. So it's endless as far as what you can develop with Tai Chi. And then we have the meditation component to it. I also teach an intro to meditation here, and that touches a little bit on what you can do with meditation as you apply it into your Tai Chi. But there's a lot more that I want to introduce to you. But this is plenty to start with.
How long have you been doing it?
Oh, martial arts since I was 7. Focused really on Tai Chi around 2006. So, you do that. But I started it, I also studied different Kung Fu systems. Part of those systems offer Tai Chi. So I had some introductions to it when I was younger as a teenager. And what captivated me most about it was I met a teacher who had someone throw a punch at him, and he easily deflected it and transferred his force back so effortlessly. It looked like he just did a movement like this. And the opponent, or the person he was working on, popped up in the air, and he seemed like he could keep going forever. But the teacher took his pinky and latched onto his wrist and pulled him back down onto the floor. And I was like, what just happened? So that piqued my curiosity in Tai Chi. And what I love about Tai Chi is that the philosophy is something that you can take, you apply it on the physical level to the body. If you want to pursue the martial arts side and you look at that level of it, it teaches you about conflict and how to resolve conflict by maintaining your own center, which is something that I think everybody needs, right? So you learn how to do that physically, then it translates into how to do that in other aspects of life. So you get a feeling of that in the core of your body. Any other questions? Does that spark anything else? I did want to mention that because Tai Chi focuses on both working with the Qi, working with your energy, and applying that meditative quality to it, as well as that martial arts side to it, you can see how it encompasses a lot of different things. The history of Tai Chi, as far as how it originated, is controversial. Okay? There's an accurate historical documentation of Tai Chi, and then there's a legend of how Tai Chi became Tai Chi. The historical is smaller as far as history concerned. It's about 400 years old. But if you take a look at the philosophy behind it, this concept of yin and yang, that's much older. It's like almost 3,000 years old. And in China, that concept of yin and yang, and basically yin and yang are ways to describe energy or qi. Like it's a very vague word. Do you know what energy is? Because I don't. I know the definition. It's the ability to do something, the ability to do work. But what is that? What is that ability? What's that motivational force, right? We don't quite know, but so it's kind of vague. And then the concept of yin and yang are also a little vague, but it gives a little bit more description to states of this energy. You have passive states and active states. So yang is more active, passive states are more yin. And that theory was applied in China centuries ago. And it was applied not just to the healing arts, it was applied to the geography, agriculture, you know, astrology or astronomy. You know, it encompassed so many different aspects of Chinese culture. So there had to be a use for it. Right? And a part of that use was in martial arts. So all of the Chinese martial arts have this concept of yin and yang. It's just Tai Chi really emphasizes how to create that yin and yang in the body. And so that's what we explore. And that's the Qigong aspect of Tai Chi. Okay. Does that, any other questions, ideas? Are you excited?
Yeah.
To start the intro? Okay, good. That's what I wanted. Wanted to pique your interest, help prepare you a bit. Do you feel prepared? You ready to? Not sure anything else that I can cover that might help you feel more prepared for it?
Maybe one-on-one.
Maybe one-on-one. Okay. All right. Anything else for anyone else? Okay. Well, that's it then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.